The stagecoach rattled to a stop in a cloud of dust, and Vivian Spencer clutched her small carpetbag tighter as she peered through the grimy window at the town of Copper Creek, Colorado. The year was 1875, and she had traveled nearly 2,000 miles from Boston to marry a man she had never met, with nothing but a few possessions and a single photograph to guide her way. The driver opened the door. "Copper Creek, madam, end of the line." Vivian descended carefully, her legs stiff from the long journey. The main street stretched before her, lined with wooden buildings, a general store, saloon, blacksmith, and other establishments typical of a frontier town. Nothing like the crowded, cobblestone streets of Boston she had left behind. She smoothed her travel-worn dress, wishing she could freshen up before meeting her intended. According to their correspondence, Mr. Xavier Thornton would be waiting for her at Hartley's general store. The thought made her stomach twist with nerves. What if he found her lacking? What if she couldn't adapt to life in this wild country? Vivian had answered his advertisement in the Eastern newspaper out of desperation. After her father's death and the discovery of his overwhelming debts, she'd been left penniless and without prospects. The idea of becoming a mail-order bride had seemed her only option. "Miss Spencer," she turned to find a gray-haired woman approaching, a kind smile on her weathered face. "Yes, that's me. I'm Martha Hartley. My husband owns the general store, Mr. Thornton asked me to meet you and bring you over." Relief washed over Vivian. "Thank you. That's very kind." As they walked, Martha chatted pleasantly about the town and its residents. Vivian tried to listen, but her attention was caught by everything around her: the wide open sky, the distant mountains, the rough-hewn buildings, so different from Boston's refinement. "Mr. Thornton's ranch is about 3 miles outside of town," Martha explained. "Beautiful piece of land. He's done well for himself. Have you known him long? Since he first came here 8 years ago, started with almost nothing and built it all himself. He's a good man." They reached the general store and Martha led her inside. "Wait here, I'll let him know you've arrived." Alone for a moment, Vivian smoothed her hair and wished again she could have changed her clothes. The store was well stocked, shelves lined with dry goods, tools, fabrics, and foodstuffs. A bell jingled as the door opened behind her. "Miss Spencer." Vivian turned and felt her breath catch. Xavier Thornton was taller than she had imagined from his photograph. Broad-shouldered and lean, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at the collar of his shirt. He removed his hat as he approached, revealing a handsome face with strong, defined features. "Mr. Thornton." She extended her hand, hoping he couldn't see how it trembled. He took it gently. "Please call me Xavier. It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person." His voice was deep and warm, with a slight drawl that hadn't been apparent in his letters. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, suggesting both laughter and hard work under the western sun. "Vivian, then," she replied. "I hope your wait wasn't too long, not at all." He seemed to study her for a moment, then added, "You must be tired after your journey. I've arranged a room for you at Mrs. Wilkins' boarding house. We can speak further once you've had a chance to rest." Surprise must have shown on her face, for he continued, "I know our arrangement was to marry upon your arrival, but I thought you might appreciate some time to settle in first, to be sure this is what you want." "That's very thoughtful of you." A slight smile touched his lips. "Well, I reckon marriage is a serious business. Best not to rush." Martha reappeared with her husband, Jim Hartley, a barrel-chested man with kind eyes. After introductions, Xavier said, "I'll take Miss Spencer to the boarding house, then return for supplies." Outside, Xavier loaded her trunk onto his wagon. "Town's not much compared to Boston," he said, offering his hand to help her up onto the seat. "It has its own charm," Vivian replied diplomatically, settling her skirts. As they drove the short distance to the boarding house, Xavier pointed out various buildings: the schoolhouse, the church, the doctor's office. Vivian tried to commit everything to memory, aware that this could soon be her home. Mrs. Wilkins proved to be a cheerful widow who showed Vivian to a small but clean room on the second floor. "I'll call for you tomorrow morning," Xavier said when they reached her door. "Perhaps you'd allow me to show you the ranch then. I'd like that very much." After he left, Vivian sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed. Everything had happened so quickly, leaving Boston, the long journey west, and now meeting the man she was supposed to marry. Xavier Thornton seemed kind and certainly handsome, but he was still a stranger. She unpacked her few belongings and changed into a fresh dress. The room had a small window overlooking the main street, and she watched the townspeople going about their business. Children ran past, a woman carried a basket of laundry, and two men stood deep in conversation outside the saloon. There was a knock at her door. When she opened it, she found Mrs. Wilkins with a tray. "Thought you might be hungry, dear. It's just some stew and bread, but it's hot." "Thank you, that's very kind." Mrs. Wilkins lingered in the doorway. "So you're Xavier Thornton's mail-order bride?" "Yes, although we haven't. That is, we're not yet married." "Smart man, giving you time to think it over. Xavier's always been considerate that way." Mrs. Wilkins smiled. "He's well respected around here. Built that ranch of his from nothing, and it's one of the finest in the county now." After Mrs. Wilkins left, Vivian ate the simple but delicious meal and prepared for bed. Sleep came surprisingly easily after the exhaustion of her journey. Morning arrived with bright sunshine streaming through her window. Vivian dressed carefully in her best day dress, a deep blue that complemented her eyes. She pinned her chestnut hair into a neat arrangement and checked her appearance in the small mirror. Would Xavier find her attractive? The thought made her cheeks warm. Breakfast with Mrs. Wilkins and her other boarders, a schoolteacher and an elderly gentleman, was a pleasant affair. Just as they finished, there was a knock at the door. Xavier stood on the porch, hat in hand. "Good morning, Miss Spencer. I hope you slept well." "Very well, thank you. I've brought the wagon. Thought you might like to see the ranch today, if you're feeling up to it." The drive out of town revealed the true beauty of the Colorado landscape. Rolling hills gave way to meadows dotted with wildflowers, and in the distance, the majestic Rocky Mountains rose against the clear blue sky. "It's breathtaking," Vivian said, taking it all in. "That it is never gets old, no matter how many times I see it." Xavier glanced at her. "Very different from Boston, I imagine." "Yes, but in a wonderful way. There's so much space," he chuckled. "That there is. Took some getting used to myself. I grew up in Philadelphia." "You did?" This was news to Vivian. In their letters, he'd spoken of his ranch and life in Colorado, but little of his past. Came west after the war, needed a fresh start, the Civil War. She wanted to ask which side he'd fought for, but thought better of it. Such questions could wait. They crested a hill, and Xavier pulled the wagon to a stop. There it is, Thornton Ranch. Below them stretched a valley with a creek running through it. A substantial log house stood near a cluster of outbuildings, barn, stables, and what appeared to be bunkhouses. Cattle grazed in nearby pastures, and horses ran in a corral near the barn. "It's lovely," Vivian said, and meant it. Xavier's expression softened with pride. "Started with 10 acres and a shack. Now it's 1,200 acres and 2,500 head of cattle." As they approached the ranch house, a dog came bounding out to meet them, followed by a young boy of about 12. "That's Jake," Xavier explained. "Orphaned in a Cheyenne raid 2 years back. I took him in." The boy reached the wagon just as Xavier helped Vivian down. "Miss Spencer, this is Jake. Jake, Miss Spencer has come all the way from Boston." The boy touched the brim of his hat. "Madam, it's a pleasure to meet you, Jake." "Jake, why don't you take care of the horses while I show Miss Spencer around?" The house was larger than it had appeared from a distance, solidly built with a wide porch wrapping around two sides. Inside, the main room was spacious, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. The furniture was simple but well made, a long table with benches, several comfortable chairs, and bookshelves filled with volumes that surprised Vivian. "You're a reader," she observed. "When there's time, winters can be long out here." He showed her the kitchen with its large wood stove, the pantry stocked with preserves, and upstairs 3 bedrooms. One was clearly his, another Jake's, and the third. "This would be yours," he said, standing in the doorway of a pleasant room with a quilted bed and a chest of drawers. A vase of wildflowers sat on the windowsill. "If you decide to stay, that is." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched her. "The flowers are lovely. Jake's idea. Said a lady would want pretty things." Back downstairs, a woman in her 50s was working in the kitchen. Miss Spencer, this is Mrs. Davis. She comes in 3 times a week to cook and help with the house." The woman wiped her hands on her apron and nodded. "Pleased to meet you, miss. Mr. Thornton said you might be staying on." "That's still to be determined," Vivian replied carefully. Xavier showed her the rest of the ranch, the barn with its horses and equipment, the chicken coop, the vegetable garden, and the bunkhouse where his ranch hands stayed. "I employ 5 men full-time, more during roundup and branding," he explained. "Good men, all of them." They walked to a small rise overlooking the property, and Xavier pointed to the mountains in the distance. "My land extends to that ridge line. Good grazing, plenty of water from the creek. You've built something remarkable here," he shrugged, but she could see the pride in his eyes. "It's a good life, hard work but rewarding. And lonely." The question slipped out before she could stop herself. Xavier was quiet for a moment. "Can be. That's part of why I wrote that advertisement. The ranch is established now. Time to think about the future." He turned to face her directly. "But I want to be clear, Miss Spencer. I won't hold you to our arrangement if this isn't what you want. Life out here isn't easy, especially for a city-bred woman." His honesty was refreshing. "I appreciate your candor, Mr. Thornton. I should be equally forthright. My circumstances in Boston became difficult after my father's death. I had few options. You're saying you had no choice but to come west. I'm saying my choice was limited, but that doesn't mean I'm not willing to make the best of it." She met his gaze steadily. "I may be city-bred, but I'm not afraid of hard work." A smile spread across his face, transforming his features. "That's good to hear." They returned to the house for a midday meal prepared by Mrs. Davis: roast chicken, potatoes, and fresh bread. Jake joined them, initially shy but gradually warming up as Xavier encouraged him to tell Vivian about his pony and his schooling. Afterward, Xavier suggested they ride back to town. "I have some business to attend to, and you might want to collect some of your things if you're considering staying at the ranch." The implication was clear: he was inviting her to move to the ranch, but without the immediate expectation of marriage. It was an unexpected and generous offer. "I think I would like that," she said. "To stay at the ranch for a while, that is, to see if I can adapt to this life." The relief on his face was evident. "Good, that's good." That evening, after returning to the boarding house with plans for Xavier to collect her the following day, Vivian sat at the small desk and began a letter to her friend Sarah in Boston. "Dear Sarah, I have arrived safely in Colorado and met Mr. Thornton. He is not what I expected, he is better. Kind, thoughtful, and giving me time to adjust before expecting marriage. The land here is beautiful beyond description, and while I know the life will be challenging, I find myself looking forward to it with hope rather than trepidation." The next morning, Xavier arrived promptly at 9. Mrs. Wilkins helped Vivian pack her trunk, offering advice about life on a ranch. "Winters can be harsh, summers hot, but spring and fall are heaven on earth," the older woman said. "And you could do far worse than Xavier Thornton for a husband when the time comes." The ride to the ranch seemed shorter this time, perhaps because Vivian was less anxious. Xavier spoke of his plans for the coming season, expanding the herd, possibly purchasing more land to the north. "Do you ever miss the East?" she asked during a lull in conversation. He considered the question. "Sometimes. The theaters, restaurants, but I wouldn't trade this life for anything. And your family, are they still in Philadelphia?" A shadow crossed his face. "Lost my parents before the war, had a brother but he fell at Gettysburg, Union side." "I'm sorry, long time ago now," he paused. "What about your family? Your letter mentioned your father's passing, but what of your mother?" "She died when I was 14. It was just father and me after that." They arrived at the ranch to find Jake waiting anxiously. "Mr. Thornton, Daisy's foaling." Xavier immediately handed the reins to Jake. "Take Miss Spencer's things to the house, then you can show her to the barn if she's interested." Vivian found herself curious about the birth. "I'd like to see if that's all right." In the barn, Xavier was already kneeling beside a beautiful chestnut mare who lay on her side in a stall thick with clean straw. The horse's sides heaved with effort. "First foal," Xavier explained quietly as Vivian approached. "She's doing fine, just taking her time." Vivian watched in fascination as Xavier murmured encouragement to the laboring mare, occasionally checking her progress with gentle hands. Jake joined them, his expression a mixture of concern and excitement. "Almost there," Xavier said after some time. "See how she's pushing more regularly now." Vivian and Jake nodded, transfixed as the mare gave a mighty push and the foal's front hooves appeared, followed by its nose. "That's it, girl," Xavier encouraged. "You're doing great." With several more contractions, the foal slid into the world in a rush of fluid. The mare immediately began to lick her baby, cleaning it as the tiny horse lay trembling in the straw. "It's a filly," Xavier announced, smiling at Jake's whoop of delight. "She's beautiful," Vivian said, moved by the scene. They watched as the wobbly foal made its first attempts to stand, falling several times before managing to balance on spindly legs. Eventually, it found its mother's milk, nursing hungrily. "Life and death," Xavier said quietly. "That's ranching, the good and the hard all mixed together." Looking at his profile in the dim light of the barn, Vivian felt something shift inside her. This man, so gentle with an animal in distress, so patient with an orphaned boy, so considerate of her own needs, he was nothing like the rough, demanding husband she had feared. That evening, Mrs. Davis served a hearty beef stew before heading home to her own family in town. After the meal, Jake reluctantly went to bed, leaving Vivian and Xavier alone by the fire. "He's a wonderful boy," Vivian said, watching Xavier stoke the flames. Came here angry and scared. Took months before he'd say more than 2 words together. Now can't get him to hush sometimes." There was affection in Xavier's voice. "You've given him a home, security." "Trying to." Xavier settled into a chair across from her. "My foreman found him hiding in a ravine after the raid." His family had a small homestead about 20 miles north. Cheyenne were hungry, desperate, took the family's food stores, killed his parents when they resisted. How terrible for him. He doesn't talk about it much anymore. Time heals some. Xavier studied her for a moment. "What about you, Vivian? What are you healing from?" The directness of his question surprised her. "What makes you think I'm healing from something?" Most people don't leave everything they know behind unless they're running from something or someone. She considered deflecting, but his honesty deserved the same in return. "After my father died, I discovered he had gambled away everything we had, including our home. There were creditors. One in particular, Mr. Hargrove, offered to settle the debts in exchange for marriage." Xavier's expression darkened. "And you chose to come west instead." "Mr. Hargrove was 30 years my senior and known for his cruel treatment of his first wife. So yes, answering your advertisement seemed the better option. I'm sorry you were put in such a position. Don't be." "I made my choice," she offered a small smile. "So far, I believe it was the right one." Over the next 2 weeks, Vivian settled into life at Thornton Ranch. She learned to collect eggs without being pecked, to make soap using tallow and lye, and to bake bread in the temperamental wood stove. Mrs. Davis proved a patient teacher, showing Vivian the skills she would need as a rancher's wife. Xavier was often busy with ranch work, but he made time each evening to sit with her and Jake, sometimes reading aloud from one of his books or teaching Vivian to play chess. She found herself looking forward to these quiet moments, watching his hands as he moved the chess pieces, listening to the deep timbre of his voice as he read. Jake, initially wary, gradually accepted her presence. One afternoon, he shyly asked if she would help him with his reading, and they began a daily practice session that soon became one of Vivian's favorite parts of the day. On Sundays, they rode into town for church services, where Vivian met more of the local residents. Most were welcoming, though she noticed a few women watching her with speculative eyes, whispering behind their hands. "Don't mind them," Martha Hartley said after one such service. "They're just curious. It's not every day a Boston lady comes to marry our most eligible bachelor." "We're not married yet," Vivian reminded her. "But you will be," Martha said with certainty. "Anyone can see the way Xavier looks at you." Vivian wasn't sure what to make of that comment. Xavier had been unfailingly kind and respectful, but he had made no romantic overtures. She wasn't even certain he found her attractive in that way. Perhaps he merely wanted a practical partnership, someone to help with the ranch and raise Jake. The thought troubled her more than it should have. Somewhere along the way, her feelings for Xavier had deepened beyond gratitude or friendship. She found herself watching him when he wasn't looking, admiring the way he moved with such confidence, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentle strength in his hands. But she had no indication that he felt the same. And given the circumstances of their arrangement, she was reluctant to reveal her growing attachment. One evening, about 3 weeks after her arrival, they sat on the porch after Jake had gone to bed. The night was clear, stars spread like diamonds across the velvet sky. A cool breeze carried the scent of pine from the distant mountains. "I received a letter today," Xavier said, breaking a comfortable silence. "From the bank in Denver. They've approved the loan for the additional acreage." "That's wonderful news. You must be pleased." "I am." He hesitated, then added, "It means more work, though. Expanding the herd, maybe hiring another hand. I'm sure you're up to the challenge." He turned to look at her, his expression serious in the lamplight spilling from the window. "Vivian, I need to ask you something." Her heart quickened. "Yes, you've been here almost a month now. I've tried to give you time, space to decide if this life is what you want. But I need to know, are you planning to stay, to go through with our arrangement?" The directness of his question caught her off guard. I have been happy here, happier than I expected to be." "That's not quite an answer." "No, I suppose it isn't." She took a deep breath. "The truth is, Xavier, I came here expecting a marriage of convenience. A practical arrangement between two people with mutual needs. But now I find myself hoping for more than that. I've grown to care for you and for Jake. But I don't know if you feel the same or if you simply want a practical wife to help with the ranch." Xavier was quiet for so long that Vivian feared she had said too much. Finally, he stood and moved to the porch railing, his back to her. "When I wrote that advertisement," he said slowly, "I was thinking practically. The ranch needed a woman's touch. Jake needed a mother figure. I told myself that was reason enough." He turned to face her. "But when your letter came with that small photograph, something changed. I found myself hoping for more too." Hope bloomed in Vivian's chest. "You did. These past weeks, watching you adapt to ranch life, seeing your kindness with Jake, your determination to learn new skills. I've come to admire you greatly, Vivian, and yes, to care for you." She stood and moved to stand beside him at the railing. "I'm glad. Because I've come to care for you as well." His hand found hers on the railing, warm and strong. "So you'll stay, become my wife?" "Yes, Xavier, I'll stay." The wedding took place 2 weeks later in the small church in Copper Creek. Martha Hartley helped Vivian sew a simple but elegant wedding dress of cream-colored silk that Martha had been saving for a special occasion. Mrs. Davis baked a 3-tier cake, and the entire community turned out for the celebration. Jake stood proudly as Xavier's best man, and Vivian walked down the aisle alone, her heart full as she saw Xavier waiting for her at the altar. His eyes never left her face as she approached, and when he took her hand, she felt as if she had finally found her home. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Xavier's kiss was gentle but filled with promise. The reception was held at the Hartleys' home, with tables set up in their large garden. There was music and dancing, and more food than Vivian had ever seen in one place. As the sun began to set, Xavier took her hand and led her to a quiet corner of the garden. "Happy?" he asked, his voice low. "Very." She studied his face in the golden light. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible." He touched her cheek. "When I sent that advertisement east, I never imagined I'd find someone like you, someone brave enough to leave everything behind and start anew, someone kind enough to take Jake into her heart. He makes it easy, you both do." Xavier glanced toward the crowd, where Jake was attempting to dance with one of the local girls, his face flushed with embarrassment and pride. "We should be getting back to the ranch soon. It's been a long day for him." "For all of us," Vivian agreed, suddenly aware of what awaited them at home. Their first night as husband and wife, as if reading her thoughts, Xavier's expression softened. "We have time, Vivian, all the time in the world." The ride back to the ranch was quiet, Jake dozing against Xavier's shoulder, exhausted from the excitement of the day. When they arrived, Xavier carried the sleeping boy to his room while Vivian went to their room now. The master bedroom that she had only glimpsed during her initial tour of the house. She changed into the nightgown she had carefully packed, a fine lawn creation with delicate embroidery at the neck and sleeves. It had been part of her trousseau, prepared in happier times before her father's death. When Xavier entered the room, he had removed his formal jacket and waistcoat, but still wore his shirt and trousers. He paused at the sight of her, standing uncertainly by the bed. "You are beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you." She felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "You look very handsome yourself." He crossed the room to stand before her, close enough that she could smell the clean scent of soap and a hint of the whiskey shared during the toasts. "I meant what I said earlier. We have time. I won't rush you, Vivian." She reached up to touch his face, feeling the slight roughness of evening stubble beneath her fingers. "I'm not afraid, Xavier. I trust you." His eyes darkened at her words. Slowly, giving her time to retreat if she wished, he lowered his mouth to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, a question more than a demand. When she responded, sliding her arms around his neck, it deepened into something more urgent. Later, lying in his arms as moonlight spilled through the window, Vivian marveled at how far she had come from that frightened young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach a month ago. She had arrived with no expectations beyond basic security, perhaps eventual companionship. Instead, she had found a man who treated her with respect and tenderness, who had given her time to know her own mind, who now held her as if she were precious. "What are you thinking?" Xavier asked, his voice a rumble against her ear where it rested on his chest. "That I'm very fortunate. That this is nothing like what I imagined when I answered your advertisement." His arms tightened around her. "I'm the fortunate one. To think you might have chosen someone else's advertisement, gone to some other territory. But I didn't. I'm here with you. And I plan to make sure you never regret that choice." The following months brought a rhythm to their life together. Xavier taught Vivian to ride properly, and she quickly grew to love the freedom of galloping across the open meadows on a mare he had selected especially for her, a gentle but spirited bay named Daisy, the mother of the foal she had watched being born. Jake thrived under Vivian's influence, improving in his studies and gradually opening up about his past. Sometimes at night, he would have nightmares, and Vivian would sit with him until he fell back asleep, singing the lullabies her own mother had once sung to her. Xavier expanded the ranch as planned, purchasing the additional land and increasing his herd. The work was constant and often exhausting, but he never failed to make time for his family. Sunday afternoons became sacred. No work was done, and they would often ride into the hills for a picnic or simply sit on the porch together, reading or talking. Their physical relationship deepened as well, each discovering what pleased the other, finding a passion that sometimes surprised them both with its intensity. Vivian had never imagined that this aspect of marriage could bring such joy, such connection. Winter arrived with a fury that took Vivian's breath away. The first major snowstorm hit in early December, burying the ranch under nearly 3 feet of snow. For days, Xavier and his men fought to keep the cattle fed and watered, returning to the house exhausted and half frozen. Vivian kept the fire roaring and food ready at all hours, learned to treat frostbite and make poultices for the men's chapped hands. She discovered a strength within herself she hadn't known existed, an ability to remain calm in crisis and to find solutions where others saw only problems. Christmas brought a brief respite from the harsh winter. They decorated the house with pine boughs and berries, and Vivian baked cookies from her mother's recipe. Jake carved a small wooden horse for Xavier and a delicate flower for Vivian. Xavier presented Jake with a new saddle and Vivian with a silver locket containing a lock of his hair, an old-fashioned gesture that brought tears to her eyes. His gift from her was a handmade quilt she had secretly been working on for months, piecing together scraps of fabric, each with a meaning: a bit of the blue dress she had worn when they first met, a scrap from Jake's outgrown shirt, a piece of the blanket that had covered the newborn foal. "It's our story," she explained as he ran his fingers over the intricate stitching. "It's beautiful," he said. "Like you." That night, after Jake had gone to bed, Xavier held her close by the fire. "I have something to tell you," he said, an uncharacteristic hesitation in his voice. "What is it?" "I received a letter from a lawyer in Boston. He's been trying to track you down." Vivian stiffened in his arms. Mr. Hargrove. No, nothing like that. It seems your father had an investment when you didn't know about, a share in a shipping company that has done exceptionally well. The lawyer has been trying to locate you to inform you of your inheritance. An inheritance, but all father's assets were sold to pay his debts. Apparently this was overlooked, or perhaps deliberately hidden from the creditors. In any case, the lawyer says the sum is substantial enough that you could return to Boston and live comfortably if you wished. Vivian pulled back to look at his face. If I wished, do you think I would leave? Leave you and Jake, the ranch, the life we're building? Relief flooded his features. I hope not, but I wouldn't keep you here if you wanted to go. Oh, Xavier, she touched his cheek. This is my home now. You and Jake are my family. I wouldn't trade this life for all the comfort Boston could offer. He pulled her into a fierce embrace. I love you, Vivian Thornton. More than I ever thought possible. And I love you, Xavier Thornton, with all my heart. Spring arrived, melting the snow and bringing new life to the ranch. The cattle gave birth to healthy calves, the garden began to sprout, and the wildflowers carpeted the meadows in a riot of color. One morning in early May, Vivian woke feeling queasy for the third day in a row. She slipped from bed, trying not to disturb Xavier, but he reached for her anyway. Sick again? He asked, concern in his voice. It will pass, it always does by mid-morning. He sat up, fully awake now. Vivian, could you be? He let the question hang in the air between them. She placed a hand on her still flat stomach. I think I might be. It's been 2 months since, and I've been so tired lately. Joy spread across his face. A baby, our baby. You're pleased then? He gathered her into his arms. Pleased doesn't begin to describe it. When they told Jake at breakfast, he stared at them in confusion, then asked, So I'll be a brother? Yes, Xavier confirmed. A big brother. That's an important job, you know. Jake's face broke into a wide smile. I'll be the best brother ever. I promise. As her pregnancy progressed, Vivian found herself marveling at how completely her life had transformed in little more than a year. From desperate and alone in Boston to cherished and surrounded by family in Colorado. Her body changed with the seasons, growing round as summer ripened into autumn. Xavier was endlessly patient with her mood swings and cravings, riding into town at midnight once when she desperately wanted canned peaches. He built a cradle with his own hands, carving intricate designs of flowers and leaves into the headboard. Jake became protective, insisting on carrying anything heavier than a book for her, and spending hours discussing what he would teach the baby: how to ride, how to fish, how to whittle wood like he was learning to do. The baby arrived on a crisp October day, just as the aspen trees were turning gold. After hours of labor, with Mrs. Davis acting as midwife and Xavier pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door, Vivian gave birth to a healthy boy with a shock of dark hair and eyes as blue as his father's. When Xavier was finally allowed in, he approached the bed with tears in his eyes. He's perfect, he whispered, gazing down at his son, just like his mother. Would you like to hold him? Xavier carefully took the swaddled infant, his large hands suddenly gentle as they cradled the tiny form. Hello, little one, I'm your pa. What shall we name him? Vivian asked, watching the two of them together. Xavier considered for a moment. What about William, after your father? The suggestion touched her deeply. Despite her father's flaws, the gesture acknowledged the man whose actions, however misguided, had ultimately led her to this life, this love. William Xavier Thornton. It's perfect. As winter settled once more over the ranch, Vivian often found herself standing at the window of the nursery, William sleeping peacefully in her arms, watching the snow fall. Sometimes Xavier would find her there and wrap his arms around both of them, his chin resting on her shoulder. Happy. He would ask, echoing the question from their wedding day, and always her answer was the same. More than I ever dreamed possible. 5 years passed, bringing changes both expected and surprising. The ranch prospered under Xavier's careful management, expanding to include a small orchard and several new pastures. Jake grew into a thoughtful young man of 17, with plans to attend college in Denver before returning to help run the ranch. William, now a sturdy 4-year-old with his father's blue eyes and his mother's quiet determination, had been joined by a sister, Elizabeth, who at 2 was already showing signs of a formidable will. A third child was on the way, Vivian's belly just beginning to round beneath her dress. The inheritance from her father had been put to good use, a portion set aside for each child's education. Another used to build a proper schoolhouse in Copper Creek, where Vivian taught 3 days a week when she wasn't expecting. On the anniversary of their wedding, Xavier surprised Vivian with a journey to Denver, leaving the children in Mrs. Davis's capable hands. It was their first trip away from the ranch together, and Vivian reveled in the luxury of the hotel, the excitement of the theater, the pleasure of having Xavier all to herself for 5 uninterrupted days. On their final evening, as they prepared for the journey home the following day, Xavier presented her with a small box. "What's this?" she asked, opening it to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a small but perfect diamond. "I couldn't afford a proper engagement ring when we married," he explained. This seemed a good time to remedy that. She slipped it onto her finger alongside her simple gold wedding band. "It's beautiful, but you know I never needed such things to be happy with you." "I know. That's one of the countless reasons I love you." He sat beside her on the edge of the bed. "Do you ever regret it, Vivian, coming west, marrying a man you'd never met?" "Never, not for a single moment." She took his hand, pressing it against her stomach where their third child grew. "This life we've built together, it's more than I ever hoped for, more than I knew to want. When you stepped off that stagecoach, I thought you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. But I was afraid you'd take one look at me at the ranch at this hard country and decide to catch the next stage back east. I was terrified," she admitted with a laugh. "Certain you'd find me lacking in some way, too city-bred, too proper, too something. Instead, you turned out to be exactly what I needed, what Jake needed, what this ranch needed. And you turned out to be everything I never knew I was looking for." She leaned against him, content in the warmth of his embrace. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day? That you wouldn't hold me to our arrangement if I didn't want it, that you wouldn't rush me." "I remember. Most men wouldn't have done that, would have expected their rights as a husband immediately. I didn't want a reluctant bride, Vivian, I wanted a partner. Someone who chose me as freely as I chose her. And that's exactly what we found in each other, isn't it? A choice freely made every day." As they traveled home the following day, Vivian watched the landscape change from the bustling city to the open plains, finally giving way to the familiar rolling hills and distant mountains of their ranch. The sight filled her with a deep, abiding peace. Xavier reached across the seat to take her hand. "Welcome home, Mrs. Thornton." She squeezed his fingers, remembering the frightened young woman who had arrived with nothing but a carpetbag and desperate hope. That woman could never have imagined the life awaiting her, a life filled with love, family, purpose, and a man who had given her the greatest gift of all, the freedom to choose her own happiness. "It's good to be home," she said, and meant it with all her heart.